The cheap tie felt like a noose around Dylan Harding's neck. He scanned the fancy restaurant, his heart a leaden weight in his chest. This was a mistake. He should be with Bella. Not here, trying to play a part he'd forgotten how to perform. But he'd promised her. He spotted his blind date at a corner table, her back to him. As he drew closer, he saw the polished chrome spokes of a wheel, then the rest of it. The woman, elegant and poised in a silk blouse, was in a wheelchair. She turned, her eyes meeting his, and in them, he saw a flash of the same caged vulnerability he felt whenever he looked at his daughter's medical chart. Before he could speak, a flicker of light from across the room caught his eye. Two men in expensive suits were watching them, one with a phone angled just so, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. They were waiting, expecting a show. And in that frozen moment, Dylan realized this wasn't a date. It was an execution. The man with the phone was William Collins, the billionaire, a man whose face was plastered on business magazines Dylan sometimes cleaned off tables at the diner. Collins was a regular, always with his snide assistant, always treating the staff like insects. It was Collins who had proposed this date, with a glint in his eye that Dylan had mistaken for bizarre matchmaking. Now he saw it for what it was. Malice. They had picked him, the poor waiter, as their weapon to shatter this woman, and they were going to record it for their amusement. Rage, hot and sharp, flared in Dylan's chest. His first instinct was to walk over, to say something that would wipe that smirk off the billionaire's face. But what would that accomplish? He'd be fired. He'd make a scene. He'd only give them the drama they craved. And worse, he'd be abandoning the woman at the table, leaving her alone in the wreckage of their cruel joke. He thought of Bella, of the lessons he tried to teach her about kindness in a world that often had none. You can only control what you do. His daughter's voice in his head was a compass. He took a breath, straightened the cheap tie, and walked the final few steps to the table. The woman, Miranda, watched him approach, her expression a mask of hardened steel, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. She was bracing for the impact. "Miranda?" he asked, his voice softer than he'd intended. She gave a stiff nod, her eyes daring him to flinch. "You must be Dylan." "I am." He didn't look at the chair. He looked at her, at the intelligence in her sharp, assessing gaze. He pulled out the chair opposite her and sat. "I'm sorry if I'm a few minutes late. Traffic was, well, it's the city." Miranda's composure wavered for a fraction of a second. Surprise. This wasn't in the script. The script was him stammering an excuse before a hasty retreat. She had seen William Collins walk in 10 minutes ago and her blood had turned to ice. She knew what this was. "This probably isn't what you were expecting," she said, her voice a flat, brittle thing. It was a test. Dylan met her gaze. "I've learned it's better not to have too many expectations," he said honestly. "Then you leave room to be surprised. It's nice to meet you, Miranda." After they ordered water, the silence was thick. Dylan could feel Collins's stare burning into his back. The billionaire was getting impatient. "So," Miranda began, her tone still guarded, "Cassandra told me you're a doctor." Dylan let out a short, humorless laugh. "No, I'm a waiter, at the Oak Haven Diner. That's probably where your friend saw me." He gestured vaguely toward Collins's table. Understanding dawned in Miranda's eyes, cold and hard. The final, humiliating piece of the puzzle. She reached for the wheels of her chair. "Well? Thank you for your time, Dylan. I think I understand the situation now." "Wait," he said, reaching out but stopping himself. "Please, don't go." She looked at him, confused. "Why? This is a joke. We're the punchline." "Because they want you to leave," he said, his voice low and firm, his eyes flicking toward Collins. "Because the one thing they aren't expecting is for two people to just sit here and have a pleasant dinner. We don't have to give them the satisfaction." For the first time, a genuine emotion broke through Miranda's mask. It was a mix of disbelief, admiration, and a sliver of hope. She looked at this man in the slightly too big suit and saw a quiet, unshakable integrity. She slowly relaxed her hands from the wheels of her chair. "Okay, Dylan the waiter," she said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "What's good here?" The dinner that followed was a strange dance of discovery. They avoided the landmines of their real lives, talking instead about the city, terrible movies they both secretly loved, and the ridiculousness of modern art. With every shared laugh, Dylan could feel the tension at William Collins' table growing. Halfway through, a bottle of champagne arrived, compliments of William. The card read, "To new friends. May you find what you both deserve." "Send it back," Miranda hissed, her jaw tight. "No," Dylan said calmly. He flagged down their waiter. "Could you please send this over to that couple in the back? The ones celebrating their anniversary." He pointed to an elderly couple sharing a dessert. "Tell them it's from anonymous admirers." Miranda stared at him, speechless. He hadn't just deflected the insult, he had transformed it into an act of kindness. "How do you do that?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine wonder. Dylan shrugged, a faint sad smile on his face. "My daughter, Bella. She's 8. She believes everyone has a little bit of good in them, even if it's buried really deep. She thinks everyone deserves a chance. I try to live up to that." When the check came, he insisted on paying his half with crumpled bills from his wallet. As they prepared to leave, he walked beside her wheelchair toward the exit, a silent, respectful presence. At the door, he turned to her. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm glad I came." "Me too," Miranda admitted, the words truer than anything she had said all night. As Dylan walked out into the cool night air, he glanced back through the restaurant window. He saw William Collins staring after him, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. The trap hadn't just failed. It had armed his enemy with a moment of genuine human connection. Dylan felt a small, quiet victory. He had a sick daughter to get home to and bills he couldn't pay. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had won. The lock on Dylan's apartment door clicked softly in the building's tired silence. He stepped inside, shrugging off his thin jacket, the faint, greasy smell of the diner clinging to the fabric. The apartment was small, the second-hand furniture having seen better days, but it was clean, and it was home. On the small sofa, curled under a worn-out quilt, was the center of his universe. "Hey, sweetie," he whispered, brushing a lock of hair from his daughter's forehead. "I thought you'd be asleep." Bella's eyes fluttered open. They were big and brown, just like her mother's, but lately held a weary shadow that no 8-year-old should have. "How was it?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. "Was she nice?" Dylan sat on the edge of the coffee table. How could he explain the ugly, complicated truth of the evening to such a pure heart? He couldn't, so he gave her the only part that mattered. "She was," he said, and was surprised by how true the words felt. "She was very nice and very strong." "Was she pretty?" "She was beautiful," Dylan said, the image of Miranda's sharp, intelligent eyes flashing in his mind. Bella seemed satisfied with this, snuggling deeper into the quilt. "See? I told you it would be okay." She let out a small, dry cough, a sound that sent a familiar spike of anxiety through Dylan's chest. He felt her forehead. "No fever, not tonight." "You should be in bed, little bug," he said gently. "I wanted to wait for you," she mumbled, her eyelids drooping. "You seemed sad before." Dylan's throat tightened. He scooped her up, quilt and all. She felt impossibly light in his arms. "I'm not sad anymore," he said, carrying her to her small bedroom. He tucked her in, smoothing the quilt under her chin. "Get some sleep. We have that checkup with Dr. Evans in the morning, remember?" Bella nodded, already drifting off. "Love you, Daddy." "I love you more, Bella Bug," he whispered, watching her for a long moment before quietly closing the door. Alone in the living room, the weight of the world settled back onto his shoulders. The brief victory at the restaurant faded, replaced by the cold reality of bills on the counter and the ever-present fear behind Bella's cough. Miles away, in a penthouse that overlooked the city like a throne, Miranda Foster wheeled herself across a vast marble floor. The apartment was a monument to success, all glass and steel. But tonight it felt like a pristine, empty cage. She stopped before the floor-to-ceiling windows. The glittering city lights spread out beneath her like a fallen constellation. She couldn't stop replaying the evening, analyzing Dylan's quiet strength. In her world, people were assets or liabilities. Kindness was a currency rarely traded without an expected return. Dylan was an anomaly, and her analytical mind was obsessed with solving the equation. She knew with certainty that Cassandra had lied. The story of a handsome doctor was too perfect, too tailored to her own insecurities. This was a corporate attack. Her hand went to her tablet. She bypassed her assistant and dialed Cassandra's private number. It was well past midnight, but she didn't care. Cassandra answered on the third ring, her voice a practiced mix of sleepiness and concern. "Miranda, is everything all right?" "I've just come from my date," Miranda said, her voice devoid of warmth. "The one you arranged." "Oh, wonderful. How did it?" "He was a waiter, Cassandra." The silence on the line was telling. Then came a flurry of theatrical gasps. "What? Oh, Miranda, no, that's impossible. The man who spoke to me was so convincing. He said he was a surgeon. He must have lied to me to get to you. Oh, this is all my fault. I am so dreadfully sorry." The performance was flawless. Too flawless. Miranda let the silence hang for a moment. "I see," she said, her voice like chipping ice. "It seems we were both made fools of. We'll have to be more careful in the future." She could almost hear the sigh of relief on the other end. "Thank you for your concern. We'll speak tomorrow." She ended the call. The game had changed. William was using spies. Firing Cassandra would be satisfying but foolish. Better to keep an enemy where you can see her. But even as her mind spun with strategy, it kept returning to the man with the kind eyes. She needed to understand him. Contacting him was a risk. She couldn't call the diner and ask for him. That would connect Miranda Foster, CEO, to the humiliating evening. She needed a firewall. She used a secure browser and purchased an untraceable burner phone for delivery. While she waited, she found the number for the Oak Haven diner. When the anonymous black phone arrived, she powered it on. She entered the diner's number but paused at the contact name. Not Miranda. Miranda Foster was a fortress. This needed to be someone else, someone softer. She typed a name she hadn't used since childhood. Mia. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. What could she say? The idea was absurd, but letting him remain a mystery felt unbearable. She typed a simple, direct message, her heart pounding with a nervous energy she hadn't felt in years. "This is Miranda from the restaurant. I just wanted to say thank you again." For everything, she stared at the words. This was a terrible, illogical idea. She pressed send. The clatter of plates and the sizzle of bacon on the griddle was the soundtrack to Dylan's life. He moved through the narrow aisle of the Oak Haven diner with a practiced, weary grace, balancing a coffee pot and 3 plates. He dropped Bella off at school after her checkup, the doctor's words still echoing in his ears. "We're running out of time, Dylan. The valve is deteriorating faster than we'd hoped. We need to get her on the surgical schedule, and that means we need the down payment, a down payment that was an impossible fortune." He forced a smile for Mrs. Gable in booth 4. "More coffee, hun?" "Always, Dylan, you know me," she chirped. As he poured, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it, likely a spam call or a low balance alert from his bank. He didn't need the reminder. Back at the counter, it buzzed again. Annoyed, he pulled it out, his thumb swiping across the cracked screen to reveal a text from an unknown number. "This is Miranda from the restaurant. I just wanted to say thank you again." For everything, Dylan stared at the message, his heart giving a strange jolt. He never expected to hear from her again. Their evening felt like a bizarre one-act play, disconnected from his reality. He read the words again. For everything. She understood why he had stayed. He didn't know how to respond, and slipped the phone back into his pocket. The unanswered message, a strange weight. He was taking an order when William Collins and his assistant walked in. Dylan's back went rigid. The diner's usual chatter seemed to fade. They didn't take their usual booth, instead walking straight to the counter where Dylan was standing. "Harding," Collins said, his voice loud enough to turn heads. "I'd like a coffee. Black. And I'd like you to find another job." Dylan's pen froze. "Excuse me? You're fired," the billionaire said with a dismissive wave. He looked at Sal, the diner's owner, who was nervously wiping the counter nearby. "Sal, you can't have employees who harass your customers. Harding here took it upon himself to bother a guest of mine last night. Caused a whole scene. It was embarrassing. It was a brazen, perfectly constructed lie." Collins was twisting the truth, painting Dylan as the aggressor. "What? That's not what happened," Dylan said, his voice low. Sal scurried over, his face pale. "Mr. Collins, sir. Dylan's been with me for 5 years. He's the best I've got." "Was the best you've got," Collins corrected. "Look, Sal, I bring a lot of business in here. It would be a shame if my associates suddenly decided the Oak Haven wasn't worth their time, all because you kept one troublesome waiter." It was blackmail, plain and simple. Sal looked at Dylan, his eyes pleading. Sal had a family, a mortgage, a business barely scraping by. He couldn't afford to fight a man like William Collins. Dylan saw the defeat in his boss's eyes before the words were spoken. "Dylan, I'm sorry," Sal stammered. "Just go get your things." A cold, quiet rage settled in Dylan's stomach. He slowly took off his apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on the counter. He didn't look at Collins. He looked at Sal. "I understand." And he did. This was how the world worked. Men like Collins burned down whatever they wanted, and men like him and Sal choked on the smoke. He walked into the back, grabbed his jacket, and left through the rear door. In the alley, he leaned against the brick wall, the injustice a physical weight on his chest. Jobless, a sick daughter, utterly powerless. He sat on an overturned milk crate and pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking. He scrolled through job listings, but his heart wasn't in it. His thumb brushed against the unopened message from Miranda. He typed a reply before he could second-guess himself. "You're welcome. I hope you got home okay." He hit send, a small act of defiance. He didn't expect a reply, but a few minutes later, his phone buzzed. "I did. And I'm glad you didn't send the champagne back." A small, weary smile touched Dylan's lips. He typed back, "Waste of good bubbles." Another buzz. "I don't know. I think you made their night, maybe. Or maybe they just got a free bottle of ridiculously overpriced champagne." The reply came instantly. "You're a cynic." "I'm a realist," he typed. He stood up, shoving the phone in his pocket. He had to figure out what to do. He couldn't let Bella see the fear clawing at his insides. In her penthouse office, Miranda stared at the last message. "I'm a realist." There was a world of disappointment in that sentence. She found herself wanting to know its story. Her morning had been spent setting a trap for William, drafting a misleading quarterly projection she intended to accidentally leave for Cassandra to find. But her strategic mind kept being pulled back to the conversation on her burner phone. Dylan's blunt honesty was jarringly refreshing. She called him. The unknown number flashed on Dylan's screen as he was walking to Bella's school. Something made him answer. "Hello? It's me," a woman's voice said. Hesitant. "Miranda. I hope it's okay that I called." "Oh, hi," he said, taken aback. "Yeah, it's fine. Texting felt impersonal," she said. "I wanted to ask you something. About last night. Why did you stay?" The question caught him off guard. He stopped walking. "I told you," I didn't want to give them the satisfaction. No, it was more than that, she pressed. You could have just sat there in angry silence. But you didn't. You tried. You made me laugh. Why? Dylan thought for a moment, watching kids spill out of the schoolyard. Because my daughter, she deserves to live in a world where people are kind to each other, even when it's hard, he said, the words rough with emotion. I know that's not the world we have, but I have to act like it is. For her, there was a long silence on the line. When Miranda finally spoke, her voice was thick. What's your daughter's name? Bella. Bella, she repeated softly. She sounds special. She is. He saw his daughter then, running toward him, her backpack bouncing, a wide smile on her face. The sight was a punch to the gut, a reminder of everything he stood to lose. I have to go, he said abruptly. Of course, Miranda said quickly. I'm sorry for bothering you. It wasn't a bother, he said. And he meant it. Maybe we could talk again sometime. I'd like that, she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. He hung up as Bella reached him. The word she'd used, friend, felt strange, new, and impossibly complicated. He didn't know then that this new friend and the billionaire who just ruined his life were on a collision course, with him and Bella standing directly in the path. And so their conversations began, a bridge built across a city of secrets. He had met Miranda, the woman in the restaurant, but on the phone, she offered him a different name, a softer name from a life she had left behind. Mia. It was a name without the weight of a billion-dollar empire, and for Dylan, drowning in the harshness of his reality, the nightly calls with Mia became his only refuge. The next 2 weeks were a special kind of hell. Dylan pounded the pavement, walking into every restaurant and diner within a 50-block radius. The response was always the same. A polite but firm, "We're not hiring," or a vague, "We'll keep your resume on file." After the 10th rejection, he knew it wasn't just bad luck. The shadow of William Collins was long and dark. His savings evaporated. The rent was due. Bella needed her medication, and the co-pay alone made his stomach clench. He sold his late wife's old guitar, the last piece of her he'd held on to. The $75 he got for it felt like both a fortune and a betrayal. His only escape was the calls. They had become a nightly ritual. After tucking Bella in, he would walk to the small park at the end of his block and talk to the woman he knew as Mia. She never asked why he was always at a park late at night, and he never explained that the walls of his apartment felt like they were closing in. Their conversations were a world away from his reality. She told him she was an art consultant, a job that sounded both impossibly sophisticated and conveniently vague. It explained her sharp, analytical mind and the hint of loneliness in her voice. A life spent observing beauty, perhaps, instead of living it. They talked about books, politics, and the joy of a truly good cup of coffee. He made her laugh, a genuine, unguarded sound that was more addictive than any drug. When he spoke of his frustrations in vague terms, "It's been a tough week," she didn't offer empty platitudes. She'd just say, "I know you will figure it out," and her quiet confidence was a balm to his frayed nerves. He never told her he'd been fired or that Bella's condition was worsening. His pride was a stubborn, foolish thing, the last currency he owned. In his conversations with Mia, he wasn't a failure. He was just Dylan, and for an hour each night, that was enough. For Miranda, the calls were a lifeline to a world where people spoke without agendas. She found herself rearranging her schedule, pushing back reports, just to be free for Dylan's call. He was the one part of her day that wasn't a battle. The rest of her life was a war room. The day after her call with Cassandra, Miranda held a senior strategy meeting in her office, ensuring Cassandra was seated directly across from her. With a casual air of frustration, Miranda brought up a slide. "I'm worried about the biotech division," she said, her voice laced with manufactured concern. "Our R&D costs are spiraling. I've run the numbers, and I think we need to consider divesting. It's a potential liability." She watched Cassandra's eyes and saw a flicker of a predator's gleam. During a short break, Miranda deliberately left the detailed and entirely false projection report on her desk. From the corner of her eye, she saw Cassandra linger, pull out her phone, and angle it toward the desk. The click of the camera was almost imperceptible. The bait was taken. 2 days later, Cassandra met William Collins for lunch. "She's planning to sell off her biotech division," Cassandra whispered, showing him the pictures on her phone. "She's calling it a liability. The whole division is undervalued. We can get it for pennies on the dollar." William's smile was predatory. "Perfect. The fool is going to sell off her own golden goose." He had no idea Miranda's biotech division was on the verge of announcing a revolutionary patent. "Prepare the offer," William told his assistant. "We're going on the attack." Dylan's last $20 was on the kitchen counter. He walked to the public library and spent hours on their computers, applying for every job that didn't require a degree. Warehouse stocker, dishwasher. Nothing. Finally, at the bottom of a page, he saw it. Nightly cleaning crew for corporate contracts, Harding janitorial services, no experience necessary. It was a gut punch. A janitor. But humiliation was a luxury he couldn't afford. He called the number, did a brief interview, and was told to report for training the next night. The pay was minimum wage. The shift was 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., but it was a job. His first assignment was a massive skyscraper in the heart of the financial district. The supervisor, Pete, handed him a cart. "You've got floors 40 through 45, he grunted. "The executive suites. They want 'em spotless. Don't touch anything on the desks. Just trash, floors, and glass. Got it?" The building was a ghost town. The silence was absolute, broken only by the squeak of his cart's wheels. Finally, he reached the top floor, the 45th. A single heavy door was marked with a simple, elegant silver plaque. Foster Enterprises, CEO Foster. The name pricked at his memory, but he dismissed it. He pushed the door open. The office was immense, bigger than his apartment. One wall was pure glass, offering a godlike view of the city. He dutifully emptied the trash can, his eyes scanning the room. It was minimalist, powerful, and clearly designed for someone in a wheelchair. The desk was lower, the pathways wide. His heart began to beat a little faster. Number. It was a coincidence. He moved to wipe down the glass of the far wall when he saw it. Hanging opposite the desk, where the CEO would see it every day, was a large, stunningly realistic oil painting. It was a portrait. It was a portrait of her, Miranda. She was depicted not in her chair, but seated on a simple stool, her expression one of intense focus and fierce intelligence. It was her, without a doubt. Underneath, a small brass plate read, "Miranda Foster, CEO and founder." The mop handle slipped from his grasp and clattered loudly on the marble floor. Miranda, Mia, the woman from the restaurant, the woman on the phone. They were all Miranda Foster, CEO of Foster Enterprises. He thought of his pathetic, honest conversations on the park bench, him talking about his tough week while she was closing multi-million-dollar deals. The entire thing, their connection, their friendship, it was a lie. A different kind of lie than William Collins, perhaps, but a lie all the same. She wasn't an art consultant. She was a queen in her castle, and he was the man who cleaned her floors. The chasm between them wasn't just a gap. It was another universe. The clatter of the mop handle echoed in the cavernous office. Dylan stared at the portrait, his breath catching in his throat. Miranda Foster, CEO and founder. The name, the title, the sheer scale of the lie. It was a physical blow. He felt a wave of hot, suffocating shame. He thought of their conversations, him on a cold park bench, her in this palace in the sky. He had confessed his simple frustrations and small hopes, thinking he was talking to an equal. But it was all a fantasy. He wasn't a friend. He was a specimen, a little project for a bored billionaire. The art consultant. The lie was so condescendingly perfect. A cold fury settled in his gut. This felt worse than William Collins's cruelty. Collins was an open enemy. This felt like a betrayal. He picked up his mop with a shaking hand and finished his work, moving through the opulent suite with a robotic, detached precision. Every polished surface seemed to mock him, every expensive piece of art a testament to the chasm between their worlds. He cleaned her desk, the place where she commanded her empire, and felt nothing but a hollow, bitter ache. He finished his shift on autopilot, his mind a chaotic storm. When he got home, the sun was just beginning to stain the horizon a pale gray. He looked in on Bella, her small form rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm. The sight of her, so innocent and unaware, made his anger at Miranda feel even more acute. Miranda's games were a luxury. His life was a tightrope walk over a canyon, and he'd just lost his safety net. That night, for the first time in weeks, he did not go to the park. He sat in his darkened living room, the silence pressing in. He wouldn't call her. He would let Mia fade back into the ether she'd come from. Just after 10, the burner phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with the name Mia. He stared at it, his jaw tight. He should let it ring until it died. But he couldn't. He needed her to know that he knew. He answered, his voice flat and cold. "Hello. Dylan." Miranda's voice was warm, oblivious. "I was worried when you didn't call. Is everything okay?" The casual concern was like fuel on a fire. "Everything's just fine, Ms. Foster," he said, the name and title coming out like venom. Never been better. The silence on the line was absolute. He could picture her in her penthouse, her perfect, calculated world, tilting on its axis. "What did you just call me?" she asked, her voice a strained whisper. "You heard me," he shot back, the words tumbling out. "I took a second job. Cleaning floors." Imagine my surprise when I ended up scrubbing the marble in the office of the CEO of Foster Enterprises, the famous art consultant. "Dylan, please," she started, her voice pleading. "Let me explain." "It wasn't like that. I wanted to get to know you. The real you, without all of this. The money, the title, getting in the way." "The real me?" He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "The broke, jobless janitor? Was I a fun little project for you? A slice of authentic poverty to break up the monotony of your board meetings? No, it was never like that. You're twisting this," she said, her voice rising defensively. "You have no idea what my life is like, the assumptions people make." "The way they treat you," he interrupted, his voice thick with disbelief. "You have no idea what real problems are. You sit in your glass tower and pretend to be normal for an hour a night to feel something, while the rest of us are down here drowning." It was then that his other phone, his real phone, began to ring. The shrill sound cut through his anger. He glanced at the caller ID, Northwood General Hospital. Every drop of blood ran cold. The rage, the resentment, Miranda. It all vanished, replaced by pure primal terror. He fumbled with the phone, swiping to answer. "Hello?" His voice was a choked rasp. On the other end of the line, Miranda heard the shift. She heard the raw fear that had obliterated his anger. "Mr. Harding?" a calm, professional voice said, loud enough for Miranda to hear over the burner phone's speaker. "This is Nurse Jessica from the Pediatric Cardiac Unit. There's been an incident. Bella's had a severe episode. The doctors are with her now, but you need to get here." Immediately, the world dissolved into a meaningless roar in Dylan's ears. "I'm on my way," he managed to say, already grabbing his keys. He was out the door before the nurse had finished speaking. He'd completely forgotten about the other call. In her penthouse, Miranda was still on the line, phone pressed to her ear. She had heard it all. Pediatric Cardiac Unit. Severe episode. Bella. "Dylan?" she called into the dead air. "Dylan, what's happening?" "Talk to me." But there was no answer. The line went dead. She stared at her phone, her own frantic heartbeat echoing in the silent, opulent room. The argument, his anger, it all felt so petty now. The vague picture she'd had of his life was a pale sketch. Now, the real picture had slammed into focus. A portrait of desperation, of a father terrified of losing his child. The man who had shown her a kindness she thought no longer existed had been living with this terror every day. The profound shame made her feel sick. For all her wealth, for all her power, she was completely, utterly useless. She finally knew the truth of his struggle, but she had burned the bridge between them at the very moment he needed someone most. The hospital's automatic doors hissed open, and Dylan sprinted through, his sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. He took the stairs to the pediatric cardiac unit 2 at a time, his lungs burning, a frantic prayer repeating in his mind. Please be okay. Please be okay. He burst onto the floor and saw Dr. Evans at the central station, her face grim and etched with exhaustion. Dylan, she said, walking over to meet him, her voice low and steady. I'm so glad you're here. What happened? Is she... He couldn't finish the sentence. We stabilized her, Dr. Evans said, placing a hand on his arm. But it was a catastrophic valve failure, Dylan. Her heart just gave out. We had to resuscitate her. She's on a ventilator and a bypass machine now. They're breathing for her and pumping her blood. We've bought her some time. The medical jargon was a sterile, terrifying language, but the meaning was clear. Bella was being kept alive by machines. Time for what? Dylan asked, his voice hollow. Dr. Evans looked him directly in the eye, leaving no room for false hope. For the surgery. This isn't a choice anymore. It's the only step left. Without a new heart, she won't survive another event like this. She's at the absolute top of the transplant list, effective immediately. But the hospital administration won't clear her for the OR until the financials are settled. The weight of it was crushing. Dylan felt his knees weaken. He was standing in a multi-million-dollar facility, and his daughter's life depended on a sum of money he could never possess. He had failed. In the single most important job of his life, he had failed. He was finally allowed to see her. The vibrant girl he had tucked into bed was gone. In her place was a small, pale, fragile doll, lost in a tangle of tubes and wires connected to a chorus of beeping, whirring machines. Her chest was still. A monitor beside the bed drew a rhythmic, artificial green line. He pulled a chair to her bedside, his body trembling, and carefully took her hand, avoiding the IV line. Her skin was cool. I'm so sorry, sweetie, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. His anger at Miranda, his lost job, it all felt like a distant, insignificant noise. The only thing real was the cold dread seeping into his bones. Daddy's so sorry. I'm going to fix this. I promise you, I'm going to fix this. The words were ash in his mouth. Miranda stared at the dead phone, the silence in her penthouse deafening. Pediatric cardiac unit. The words echoed, a chilling counterpoint to Dylan's furious accusations. He thought her life was a game. He had no idea. Powerlessness was a feeling she had fought every day for 6 years, and she wouldn't surrender to it now. She wheeled herself to her desk, her mind razor-sharp and focused. She was a CEO. Problems were things to be solved. Her first call was to Jonathan Reed, Northwood General's chief administrator. He also sat on the board of her company's foundation. He answered immediately. Jonathan, I need information, she said, dispensing with pleasantries. A child in your pediatric cardiac unit, Bella Harding. I need her exact status and prognosis. This is a matter of the utmost and most confidential importance. There was a slight pause. Of course, Miranda. I'll get back to you within 10 minutes. 7 minutes later, he called back, his voice somber. He relayed the details. Grade 4 congestive heart failure, the life support, the grim prognosis. Then came the key piece of information. It's a tragic situation. The father is a single parent, unemployed. There's a significant financial hold on the account. We can't proceed with a transplant, even if a donor becomes available, until the account is secured." "I see," Miranda said, her voice dangerously calm. "Thank you, Jonathan. I expect absolute discretion in this matter." She hung up. The problem was identified, but the solution wasn't simple. Dylan's pride was a fortress. After their fight, he would see her money as the ultimate act of pity. He would refuse it. Number. It had to be anonymous. For the rest of the night, Miranda worked with ferocious intensity. She routed funds through an overseas subsidiary and into her foundation's discretionary fund. She woke her personal lawyer, a man accustomed to nocturnal demands, to draft the legal framework for a new emergency grant. It wouldn't be the Foster Foundation grant. It would be the Evergreen Children's Health Initiative, a name so bland and generic, it defied suspicion. The paperwork was a labyrinth of legal clauses, designed to make the source of the funds impossible to trace. As the first gray light of dawn broke over the city, she made one final call to Jonathan Reed. "Jonathan," she said, her voice firm, "you're about to receive a wire transfer from the Evergreen Children's Health Initiative. It will cover all of Bella Harding's expenses. You will lift the financial hold on her account immediately. When the father asks, you will tell him it was an anonymous grant for a high-priority case. Is that clear?" "Miranda, Yes, of course," he stammered. "Consider it done." She ended the call and hit send on the final wire authorization. Transfer complete. The financial obstacle was gone. But alone in her glass tower, she had never felt more powerless. She had fixed the problem with dollar signs, the shattered trust, the chasm of his grief. That was a problem she had no idea how to mend. Across the city, in the sterile quiet of the ICU, Dylan had finally succumbed to exhaustion, his head on the edge of his daughter's bed, completely unaware of the miracle that had just been set in motion. A gentle hand on his shoulder startled Dylan awake. Blinking in the disorienting fluorescent lights of the ICU, he saw a nurse standing over him. Her expression was soft with a sympathy he'd grown to dread, and he braced himself for bad news. "Mr. Harding," she said, "Dr. Evans needs to speak with you in her office." Dylan's heart hammered against his ribs. He followed the nurse down the hall in a fog, each step a march toward a verdict. Dr. Evans was standing by her desk, but her face was not grim. She was holding a file, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and something else he couldn't quite place. "Dylan, sit down," she said. He remained standing. "Just tell me." "There's been a development," she began. "The hospital's Financial Ethics Board reviewed Bella's case this morning. Due to the urgency, they fast-tracked her for an emergency grant." Dylan stared at her, uncomprehending. "A grant? What are you talking about?" "It's from a fund called the Evergreen Children's Health Initiative," Dr. Evans explained, consulting the file. "It's an endowment that seeks out high-priority, critical cases. Bella's situation was a perfect match." "Dylan, the grant covers everything, the surgery, post-operative care, all of it. The financial hold has been lifted." Dylan sank into the chair, the words washing over him. It didn't make sense. It was impossible. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. "Who?" "I don't understand. Why?" "These funds are completely anonymous," the doctor said gently. "All you need to know is that your daughter has a full, unconditional green light from this hospital. All we need to worry about now is what matters most." Tears welled in Dylan's eyes, not of grief, but of sheer, disbelieving relief. He dropped his head into his hands, a ragged sob of gratitude tearing from his chest. He had just collected himself when Dr. Evans' pager beeped insistently on her belt. She glanced at it, and the strange expression from earlier returned, now amplified. "Excuse me for one moment," she said, stepping out. Dylan sat there, his mind reeling from the whiplash of the last 12 hours. Despair, terror, and now this impossible life-altering hope. When Dr. Evans returned, her professional composure was barely masking a deep excitement. "Dylan," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "They found a potential donor, a preliminary match for Bella. It's at a hospital a few hours away. They're running the final compatibility tests now, but the initial markers are very, very strong. If it's a match, we could have a heart here by tonight." Miranda was in a virtual meeting with her European board but wasn't hearing a word, her attention fixed on the silent burner phone on her desk. Did he know? Did he believe the story? Did he hate her any less? Her personal line buzzed. It was Jonathan Reed from the hospital. She excused herself from the meeting, her heart pounding. "We have a potential donor, Miranda," he said, his voice buzzing with the thrill of being an insider to a miracle. "A perfect match, it looks like. The surgical team is on standby. Thanks to your initiative, we can proceed without delay." A wave of relief so profound it left her dizzy washed over Miranda. It was working, but the victory felt solitary in her silent office. She felt a desperate, aching need to talk to him, to hear the relief in his voice. But she knew she had to wait. Hours passed, the longest of her life. The sun began to set. And then, the burner phone vibrated. A text message. From Dylan. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. "Bella is very sick. She's in the ICU at Northwood. I'm sorry for what I said." The message was a gut punch of humility and pain. He was apologizing to her, even now. She typed and deleted a dozen responses. She had to be Mia. Just Mia. "Don't be sorry, Dylan," she finally typed. "Just be with her. Is there anything at all I can do?" She watched the 3 small dots of his reply appear and disappear. Then, the message came through. "No, someone already did everything. An anonymous donor paid for it all. They think they found her a heart." Miranda read the words, and a bittersweet sadness mixed with her relief. Her plan had worked perfectly. He didn't suspect her. He believed in miracles. She felt a pang of guilt for the deception, overshadowed by the fierce joy that Bella was safe. She typed one last message. "That's incredible news, Dylan. I'm hoping with everything I have that it works out." The reply came a moment later. "Me too. The waiting is the hardest part." Miranda leaned back in her chair. He was right. The waiting was the hardest part. For all her power, she couldn't make the tests run faster or guide the surgeon's hand. All she could do now was the one thing she hadn't done for anyone in years. Wait. And hope. Just like him. The call came an hour later. Dylan was pacing a worn track in the small family waiting room when Dr. Evans found him. "It's a perfect match," she said, and the 3 words were the most beautiful sentence he had ever heard. "The transport team is bringing the donor heart now. We're prepping Bella for the operating room. It's happening. Dylan." The relief was so immense it felt like a physical blow, followed immediately by a wave of paralyzing fear. This was it. He was allowed to see Bella one last time. She was unconscious, but her face seemed peaceful. He leaned down and kissed his daughter's forehead. "You be brave, little bug," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You fight. You hear me? Daddy's right here. I'm not going anywhere." He squeezed her hand and felt a faint pressure in return, likely a reflex, but he held on to it like a promise. He watched as they wheeled her bed down the long corridor and through a set of double doors. Then she was gone. He was alone. The surgical waiting room was a special kind of purgatory. The air was stale, the chairs uncomfortable, and the clock on the wall moved with a malicious slowness. Other families were scattered around the room, each in their own private bubble of anxiety. They were all members of a club no one wanted to join. Dylan felt a profound, crushing loneliness. He pulled out the burner phone, needing an anchor. He sent a simple text to the only person who felt like a friend. "They're taking her in now." The phone didn't buzz with a reply. It rang. He answered on the first ring. "Dylan." Miranda's voice was soft, steady. "Talk to me." "What's happening?" "She's in surgery," he said, his voice a raw whisper. It's a 12-hour procedure, they said. Maybe longer, an eternity. Okay, she said. Okay, so we wait. The word we hit him with surprising force. He sank into one of the chairs, the phone pressed to his ear. I'm so scared, Mia. I know, she said. It's okay to be scared. And so they talked for hours. The fluorescent lights hummed. The clock ticked off the seconds of Bella's life, and Miranda's voice became his entire world. She asked him questions, drawing out stories he hadn't told in years. He told her about his wife, Sarah, about their first date, the way she'd laughed, and the crushing battle with cancer that had stolen her from them. He confessed this felt terrifyingly similar. The same sterile hallways, the same helpless waiting. When she was sick, Dylan said, his voice thick with memory, I had to be the strong one for her. Now, with Bella, I have to be the strong one again, but I don't think I have anything left. You don't have to be strong right now, Dylan, she said softly. Not with me. And so she told him a story of her own. As Mia, she told him about a car accident 6 years ago. She didn't mention the details, just the aftermath. The feeling of waking up unable to feel her legs, the grueling therapy, the way the world suddenly changed, how people started looking at her with pity instead of respect. The hardest part wasn't learning to live in a chair, she said, her voice a low murmur. It was fighting to be seen as a whole person again. Not a tragedy, not an inspiration, just a person he listened, captivated. He had seen her strength, her defiance. Now he was hearing about the vulnerability it was built upon. They were two impossibly different people, but here, in this moment, their pain was a shared language. They were both survivors. While Dylan sat in the waiting room, William Collins sat in a sleek, glass-walled boardroom, tasting victory. The pieces are in place, he said to his team. The intel is solid. Foster's planning to divest her biotech assets at a loss. We'll trigger the hostile bid on Thursday. The market will panic, and we will sweep in and pick up the company for a fraction of its worth. He leaned back, a smug smile on his face. He pictured Miranda's face when she realized she'd been outmaneuvered, her empire crumbling. It would be his greatest triumph. He had no idea he was a puppet, walking confidently into the most devastating trap of his career. 8 hours into the surgery, Dylan had fallen silent. The stories were all told. The fear had settled into a dull, thrumming ache. Miranda was still on the line, her own silence a comforting, steady presence. He must have drifted off, because the next thing he knew, a shadow fell over him. He blinked his eyes open. The double doors from the surgical wing had swung open. Dr. Evans was walking toward him. She had a blue surgical mask covering her face and a cap on her head. Her eyes, the only part of her face he could see, were impossible to read. Dylan's heart stopped. He shot to his feet, the burner phone still clutched to his ear. Miles away, in a dark penthouse, Miranda held her breath, able to hear everything. Dr. Evans stopped a few feet in front of him. She reached up with a gloved hand and slowly, deliberately, pulled down her mask. The silence stretched for an eternity. Dylan's entire world had shrunk to the space between him and the doctor, to the unreadable expression in her eyes. On the phone, he could hear Miranda's sharp, indrawn breath. Dr. Evans's eyes crinkled at the corners. A small, exhausted, utterly beautiful smile appeared on her face. It was a long, complicated procedure, she said, her voice husky with fatigue. We had a few difficult moments, but the new heart is in. It's beating strong. She's stable, Dylan. She's in recovery now. She did it. Your daughter is a fighter. The words seemed to come from a great distance. Dylan felt his legs give way, and he collapsed back into the hard plastic chair, the burner phone slipping from his grasp. A sound that was half sob, half laugh escaped his lips. The tension that had coiled in his gut for years finally snapped. He dropped his head into his hands and wept with a relief so pure it was a physical agony. He fumbled for the phone on the floor. "Did you hear?" he choked out. "She's okay. Mia, she's okay." "I heard," Miranda whispered, her own voice thick with unshed tears. "Oh, Dylan, I heard." They stayed on the line, sharing the sacred silent victory across the miles that separated them. The next 2 days passed in a blur of hopeful exhaustion. Bella was in the ICU, unconscious but stable. The machines were still there, but now they were supporting her recovery, not just keeping her alive. The rhythmic green line on the monitor was the beat of a new heart, a stranger's gift that was now his daughter's future. Dylan never left her side, reading her favorite stories aloud. His calls with Mia continued. Their tone shifted from desperation to hope. They talked about the future, a concept that had been a terrifying fog for Dylan but was now taking shape. "The first thing we're going to do when she's better," he told Mia one afternoon, watching sunlight fall across Bella's bed, "is go to the zoo. She loves the monkeys." "I like the penguins," Miranda found herself saying. "They're so clumsy on land, but in the water, they're graceful. They just need to be in the right element." The lie of her identity felt heavier now, a shadow in these bright, hopeful conversations. The real world, however, was not content to wait. The day after Bella's surgery, as Dylan watched his daughter's chest rise and fall, Miranda was watching her company's stock price nosedive. An alert flashed on her screen. Collins Capital announces hostile takeover bid for Foster Enterprises. The war had begun. William had taken the bait. News outlets were already running with the story, citing anonymous sources who spoke of instability and a weak biotech division, the exact narrative she had fed to Cassandra. The empathetic Mia vanished. In her place was the formidable CEO. She began firing off emails and preparing her counterattack. That night, Dylan knew he had to go back to work. The grant had been a miracle, but the future held a long road of expensive medications. He couldn't afford to lose this job. After kissing a still-sleeping Bella goodnight, he put on his gray uniform and headed to Foster Tower. He was cleaning a hallway on the 44th floor, near a darkened conference room, when he heard voices from inside. He froze, his hand tightening on his mop. He recognized them instantly. William Collins and a woman, Cassandra. "The board meeting is at 10 a.m. sharp," William was saying, his voice gloating. "It's just a formality. We have the votes. Miranda still doesn't suspect a thing," Cassandra said. "She thinks this is a standard corporate raid." Dylan pressed himself into the shadows of the hallway, his heart pounding. "She's been unfocused lately," Collins sneered. "And that little prank we pulled with the waiter? That was just the beginning. The perfect way to throw her off balance. He was the perfect pawn. What happened to him?" Cassandra asked with mild curiosity. "Who cares? Fired, I assume. Good riddance. He served his purpose." William's voice dropped, full of triumphant finality. "Now, we finish the job. Foster is finished. By noon tomorrow, this company will all be mine." Dylan stood frozen in the hallway as the pieces slammed into place with sickening force. The date, his firing, the takeover. It was all one long malicious plan, and he had been the first domino. They had used him to hurt Miranda, the woman he knew as Mia, the woman who had sat with him through the darkest night of his soul. His fear and grief were burned away by a white-hot, righteous fury. He watched as Collins and Cassandra emerged from the room, laughing, not even noticing the janitor in the shadows. As they disappeared into the elevator, Dylan looked down the long hall toward the executive boardroom. He was no longer a pawn. He was the one person who had heard it all. And he knew, with an absolute and unshakable certainty, that he wasn't going to let them win. The morning of the board meeting dawned crisp and clear. Dylan was at the hospital before sunrise. He slipped into Bella's room and found her, for the first time, awake. Her eyes were groggy, but they were open. She was looking at him. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice a tiny, scratchy thing. "I'm here, sweetie," he said, his voice catching as he took her warm hand. He squeezed, and she squeezed back, a flicker of her old strength. "I'm right here." He stayed with her for an hour, a lifetime of relief and love passing between them. Finally, he kissed her forehead. "I have to go do something important, little bug," he said. "Something for us. But I'll be back this afternoon. I promise." As he left the hospital, a text came through on the burner phone. "Thinking of you and Bella today. Stay strong." He smiled. She had no idea. He typed a quick reply. "You too." The boardroom on the 45th floor was a theater of tension. At the head of a vast mahogany table, Miranda sat poised in her wheelchair, a lone queen on a chessboard. At the podium, William Collins was in his element, weaving a narrative of incompetence, using Miranda's own fabricated data as his proof. "The numbers speak for themselves," he declared. "Foster Enterprises is a ship taking on water, and the current leadership is too weak to plug the holes. My offer is not an attack. It is a lifeline." Cassandra sat at the table, nodding with faux solemnity. "Therefore," William concluded, his voice booming, "I call for a vote to accept the acquisition offer." The boardroom doors burst open. "Get him out of my boardroom. Now!" William roared, his face turning purple as he saw who it was. Dylan Harding, in his simple gray janitor's uniform, strode into the room. Two large security guards moved to intercept him as chaos erupted. "Wait!" Miranda's voice cut through the noise, sharp and commanding. The guards froze. "Let him speak!" William sputtered, incredulous. "Miranda, this is the disgruntled employee I had fired. He's trespassing." Dylan ignored him, his eyes scanning the powerful faces staring at him. He was terrified, but the memory of Bella's hand squeezing his was a fire in his chest. "My name is Dylan Harding," he said, his voice clear and steady. "And last night I was cleaning the hallway on the 44th floor. I heard a conversation between Mr. Collins and that woman right there." He pointed directly at Cassandra, who went white. "I heard them gloating," Dylan continued. "I heard Mr. Collins call me a pawn. I heard him brag about a prank they pulled to throw Miss Foster off balance. I heard Miss Cassandra tell him how she'd been feeding him information, and I heard them say that this meeting was just a formality to finalize their victory." He looked directly at William. "You said she was finished. That by noon, this company would be yours. I heard it all." William laughed, a harsh sound. "This is the pathetic fantasy of a man I had fired for stealing. You can't possibly believe this nonsense. Mr. Collins is correct about one thing," Miranda said calmly, her voice drawing every eye. "The trap was about to close. The data he has presented is indeed alarming." She clicked a button, and the screen behind William changed. "However, the data he presented is also a complete fabrication. A fiction I personally authored 3 weeks ago." A new slide appeared, showing security logs. "A fiction I knew would be photographed and passed along to him by my associate." She looked at Cassandra, her eyes like chips of ice. "Cassandra, thank you for your service." The mole looked as if she'd been turned to stone. Miranda clicked the button again. The real data filled the screen, the successful clinical trials, the pending revolutionary patent. Far from being a liability, our biotech division is poised to become the most valuable asset in the industry. Mr. Collins didn't just make a hostile bid. He bet his entire company on a lie. The room erupted. William stood at the podium, speechless, his face a mask of horror. "As for Mr. Harding," Miranda said, her voice softening as she turned to Dylan, "he is not a disgruntled employee. He is a man of unshakable integrity whom they cruelly targeted, and every single word he just said is the absolute truth." Her victory was total. William and Cassandra were escorted out by security, their careers in ashes. The board, seeing the genius of her counter-maneuver, gave her a thunderous standing ovation. An hour later, the boardroom was empty, save for two people, the janitor and the CEO. "Mia," Dylan said softly, the name a question and an answer. Miranda wheeled herself closer, her eyes shining with tears. "Dylan, I am so sorry. For not telling you?" He shook his head, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You saved my daughter's life." He knew. He'd pieced it all together. The Evergreen Children's Health Initiative. Evergreen. Your favorite park as a kid. You told me that on the phone. She didn't deny it. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. "You saved my company. My life's work. It seems we're not even," he said, closing the distance between them and gently taking her hand. "I'm still very much in your debt." 6 months later, the sun shone on a perfect Saturday in Evergreen Park. At the center of a newly built all-abilities playground, a small girl with a cloud of brown hair and a faint scar down her chest chased a soccer ball, her laughter echoing in the clear air. Dylan watched her, his heart full. Beside him, Miranda smiled, her hand resting in his. "She looks happy," Miranda said. "She's healthy," Dylan replied. "That's all I ever wanted." He was now the executive director of the Evergreen Children's Health Initiative, which Miranda had officially and massively endowed. He spent his days helping families trapped in the same hell he had escaped. His compassion, now his life's work. Bella ran over, grabbing both their hands. "Come on, you have to push me on the swings." As they walked across the grass, a comfortable, easy unit, Dylan looked at Miranda. He saw the brilliant CEO, but he also saw Mia, the friend who had stayed on the phone with him through the longest night of his life. And Miranda looked at Dylan, not as a pawn or a project, but as the man whose quiet integrity had reminded her how to be human. Together they had found what their separate worlds could never offer, not a perfect life, but a real one. A home built not on wealth or status, but on the simple truth that the best investment is in the goodness of another person. And so, our story finds its way out into the world. I always love to think of these tales finding a home after I send them off. If you feel like sharing, I'd be honored to know where this one landed with you tonight. A comment with your city or just a simple hello from your part of the world truly brightens my day. If you'd like to be a destination for future tales, the best way to ensure they find you is by leaving a like and subscribing. That notification bell is like putting your name on the map, so the next story I send out knows exactly where to go. Until our paths cross in the next chapter, be well, and thank you for listening.